How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. How much Bitcoin do you need to retire? Well, that's a question that a lot of people want to know as they're loading up on Bitcoin, as they see BlackRock and Fidelity and all these entities coming into Bitcoin, MicroStrategy buying up tens of thousands of Bitcoin at a time. They want to know, if I buy this in front of everyone that is going to flood into the market, how much would be significant? How much would change my life? How much could help me retire? And while those numbers are different for everyone based on your own expenses and based on your own lifestyle preferences, I think we can come to some calculations that people will be satisfied with. Now, of course, part of it's going to depend on your own bullishness. So we're going to run different scenarios. If Bitcoin hits $100,000 in 10 years, if Bitcoin hits 500,000, if Bitcoin hits a couple million, how many Bitcoin would you really need to retire based on different lifestyle preferences? So if you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notification so we can see future videos, or so that you can see the future videos just like this one. And to be clear, I've done this in the past. Every month or couple months, I do some kind of updated version of this. But it's crazy after the last couple months how much we've moved up, how much more difficult it is to buy some of these assets. I did this when Bitcoin was at 17,000. I did it when it was at 28. I did it at 36 recently. Now Bitcoin's at 42,000, 43,000, and I'm doing it again. So pay attention. Mark this down. Go watch this now. Share it to a friend because you don't want to be late. A month difference in timing can change the game for how much you need to spend to be able to retire in Bitcoin. Now, while you're down there hitting subscribe, there's also a link to Margex where you can trade cryptocurrency. This is a way to try to amplify your returns if you're really bullish in the medium term or the long term or the short term. You can go and try to leverage trade. I've seen a lot of people start to sign up for this. There's a lot of excitement in the market. A lot of people are trying this out, especially since we have been choppy a bit. You can make pretty decent returns even in a sideways market. There's no KYC and no VPN as well. So check that out underneath the video. Last thing I want to talk about too is we're unveiling this next week, but I want to give you guys access even before some other channels talk about it. HG Access is something that we're providing people with, that we are doing with a couple other YouTubers, and it's going to be like 10 different YouTubers that get on live calls every single week and talk about what they're seeing in the market, what they're seeing behind the scenes, because while it's great to just plug and chug on Bitcoin, the fact is some people want to get extra alpha in altcoins, and there are going to be a lot of resources we throw at this, including, depending on your tier, even being able to ask questions or ask the VAs to make alpha reports on certain cryptocurrencies so you can have someone else do some of your research for you or like start the process. And we're going to give you information that you can't get anywhere else, like who's spending money. What are they trying to advertise? Where is money headed? That's going to be stuff that we talk about all the time. So if you want, I'll leave a link to this. We aren't open yet, so you can't sign up officially, but you can get free access right now, or you can become like a free member, which doesn't give you anything in the long term, but it puts it on your radar. So that way, when we unveil it for real in about a week, you can get full access if you decide to sign up. There are a lot of cryptos out there. I've talked about how to retire on XRP, how to retire on Solana, how to retire on Ethereum, Cardano, Bitcoin. If there are any other ones that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments section. But I like to cover Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the most stable cryptocurrency out there, and it's one that I am very bullish on. I think it's less risky than a lot of other cryptocurrencies. There are less assumptions we have to take into account, but there are some. So a couple things you need to know before we get into this chart or this spreadsheet is we're going to use a 4% safe withdrawal rate. This comes from traditional finance, but basically they say that if you have a portfolio in the S&P 500, chances are good that you can retire and live on withdrawals if you take 4% of your portfolio. So if you have a $2 million portfolio, you can withdraw about $80,000 a year, and the gains make up for what you pull out of the market. Now, they look at a bunch of historical information. They look at all different time periods to determine how likely it would be for you to retire and run out of money versus retire and have more than enough money. They've come out saying that the withdrawal rate is around 4%. Some people say 3, some people say 3.5, some people say 5. Dave Ramsey recently said 8, but I like to go with 4%. That is going to be okay in about 95% of scenarios. So we're going to use that number. we're also going to assume that you have the normal cost of living here in the US, about $70,000. Now, if you're retiring or retiring early, you probably want to have a better lifestyle than the median or the average. I forgot which one this is, but the normal cost of living. So we're going to run scenarios where you spend $100,000 a year and run scenarios where you spend $250,000 a year. We've done this in the past where we show a lot more scenarios, but I want to keep it simple here. So 2 different scenarios. One, you spend 6 figures a year. One, you retire and you spend $250,000 a year. Now, of course, Bitcoin can go to all different prices. We're going to look at about a 10-year span, how much Bitcoin you need. We're going to show it in the US. We're going to show it in the world's happiest nation. We're going to show how you could get there in a bear market. We're going to show how you could dollar cost average right now to get to these goals. So stick through, but we'll start here really simply. Let's say you wanted $100,000 a year to retire. You need about a $2.5 million Bitcoin portfolio. Now, depending on Bitcoin's price, depending on how bullish you are, you're obviously going to need more or less Bitcoin. So if you think Bitcoin's only going to go up to 100,000 in 2033, I don't know why you're watching this video. I'm just kidding. But if you think it's only going to 2x in the next 10 years, I think that is pretty bearish, honestly. If you're watching this video, you're still early on in crypto, and that would be just 1.5 times our prior all-time high over the next 10 years. That would be, I think, very bearish. As I said, we've already gone up 150% or 2.5x from the bottom this year. So in that scenario, you would need a lot of Bitcoin, 25 Bitcoin. Now, moving down the line, let's just unveil a lot of these. If you think Bitcoin's going to go to 250K in 10 years, I still think that's a little bit bearish when you think we're going through multiple new cycles. We're getting large entities buying up Bitcoin. I mean, even MicroStrategy has bought up 1% of the supply in the last 2 or 3 years, and they're not a big company. They're barely top 500 in the US. But you would need about 10 Bitcoin. Continue down the line. If you thought Bitcoin's going to 1 million, you need 2.5, 2 million, you need 1.25. Now, this doesn't necessarily account for inflation, but we're going to assume that 6 figures a year is enough to cover inflation, and you can always add a little bit extra, like instead of 1.25, you could have 1.3 or 1.4, something like that. Now, if you want to retire rich, and I say retire rich, everyone has their own scenario. Some people might think that's barely any money. Some people think that they don't need a fifth of that. But in this scenario, you need a lot more Bitcoin, obviously. You need 2.5 times as much Bitcoin because you're spending 2.5 times as much. So in the $1 million Bitcoin scenario, you need 6.25 Bitcoin. And of course, there's going to be a lot of volatility along the way. Now, what if you want to retire but in a different country? Different country than like the US or some Western country. What if you want to retire in Finland? Finland is the happiest country in the world for the 6th year in a row. Their cost of living is just slightly higher than the US, around $75,000. So we're going to take into account just the cost of living. Instead of putting $100,000 in here or requiring $100,000 a year, we're just going to do the $75,000. In the scenario that we only get to $100,000 Bitcoin, you need about 18.75. If we get to $1 million, you need about 1.88. And you can pause it if you want to compare this over to here. You can look at the different scenarios, but you need a little bit less, obviously, because we're assuming that your cost of living is lower than when you were to retire in the US. Now, I realize this is still a lot of money for people, for almost everyone out there. A lot of people don't have $215,000, but keep in mind, if you just wait too long, it can get much more expensive. I mean, 2 months ago, basically, we were at 28,500. So Bitcoin's gone up 50% since then. Now, instead of this 215,000, you could have bought it a few months ago for 142,000. And if you go even further back, if you go to the bottom of the bear market, just this bear market, not anything crazy, you could have bought it for much cheaper still. I mean, you would have been looking at $77,500 instead of the $215,000 now. You could have bought for $77,500. If you go back another bear market, you could have gotten it for much cheaper because Bitcoin went all the way down to 3,200. You could have bought that same scenario for 16 grand. So it's fine to be sad, sit on the sidelines, but the fact is Bitcoin usually goes up. It's better just to buy, and no one's telling you that you have to retire in 2033. If it takes you a little bit longer, that's fine, right? And this is all just based on these numbers that we're giving here. You have to make your own assumptions. Maybe you think Bitcoin's going much higher, and then you need a lot less to retire. Now, what if you want a dollar cost average that? What if you're just like, okay, I see that I need some Bitcoin. How do I get there? Well, I ran a scenario where we start this year, 2023. Bitcoin's price about 43,000 right now. Let's say 2024, it averages about 100K, then 200K in 2025. Then we have a crash, 60% down. So we go down to 80, then up to 130, 250, 500,000, and then we crash again. About, 70% or so. And then 2031 comes around, we get back to $250,000. Eventually, 10 years from now, we get to $1 million. But it's bumpy along the way. Well, honestly, you still have to put up a decent amount of money in this scenario. Like in this scenario, I said that you would start with $43,000. You're trying to get to 2.5 Bitcoin. It's easiest to invest now before the next bull run when everything gets more expensive. So we're going to assume that you start with 1 Bitcoin this year. Then you're able to invest, but you invest less each year because prices are going up. So the next year, like in 2024, you invest 90% of what you invested the year before, and you continue this trend where you invest 90% of the prior year until you're investing about 15,000. You could get up to that 2.56 Bitcoin. I get it. It's still hard to get up to a full Bitcoin. It's still hard to get up to 2.5 Bitcoin, but you're talking about retiring in 10 years on an asset. It's going to be hard. In this scenario, you're investing about $300,000, but in the end, it's worth about $2.56 million. So you'd be able to retire, have a little bit extra, even that extra 60 grand to buy yourself a new car or something in this scenario. Now, of course, do your own research. I feel like I'm giving a lot of disclaimers, but that's because I don't want people to go out there and say, oh, I'm just going to smash buy a Bitcoin even though I've never bought it and this is money that I need next month to buy a house, right? I don't want that to happen. I want you to make a plan long term, understand Bitcoin. This is just something that's fun to do. Like when you break down the numbers like this is kind of like dessert, right? You need to understand Bitcoin. You need to understand why it's valuable and why people are trying to get into it. You have to understand the supply shock, and then you can play around with these numbers afterwards. This is just like a little bit of something fun to do on top of all the actual knowledge that you need to have to invest in Bitcoin. And keep in mind, there are so many different numbers that are important for Bitcoin. For example, if you have 0.28, you probably have more than any millionaire, the average millionaire will be able to have. There are about 60 million millionaires. There's not that much Bitcoin left. So take 21 million divided by the number of millionaires. You barely have 0.35, but keep in mind there's some lost as well. So that's where we get to that 0.28. Now, you can also look at how much the average person on Earth could have, and it's 0.00025 Bitcoin. If you took all the Bitcoin and divided it up by the people on Earth right now, and keep in mind, there are more and more people losing Bitcoin every day. There are more and more people being born every day. So that number continues to go down. There are all different numbers I could throw in there for how much Bitcoin you want. I mean, we could look at living somewhere tropical. It's less expensive. Maybe somewhere where you need to spend $30,000 a year. You need a lot less than 1 Bitcoin in that scenario if we get up to a $1 or $2 million Bitcoin. Now, I say start with 0.01 Bitcoin because I think that's a good jumping off point for a lot of people. I realize that's so expensive, but you want some skin in the game, and I don't know your personal situation. Make sure that you're comfortable with whatever you're buying, but $500, especially for a newer investor, is a decent amount of money, so you're probably going to be researching, you're going to be paying attention. Of course, that's too much for some people, that's not enough for others, so do your own research, but some number. You need to get some skin in the game to start investing in cryptocurrency and in Bitcoin specifically. And you have to decide that number for yourself. Just make sure you're comfortable with it. But you do need to get started before it's too late, in my opinion, if you are bullish on this asset class. Some people are only buying Bitcoin right now. Some people are only buying alt. Some people are going 5% Bitcoin allocation, the rest into a 401k. Just make sure you're comfortable with your situation. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Check out HG Access underneath the video so you can get like first dibs when we actually allow people to get in there. Also, check out Margex where you can long or short different cryptocurrencies. Thank you so much. Let me know if there are any assets you want me to cover specifically in future videos, certain cryptocurrencies in some kind of scenario like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.